Hello, thank you so much for joining me. If you follow me on Instagram in yesterday's Instagram post, I promised I would explain afferent feedback. So that's what this is about. I think it's important to do this because I think these terms are frequently thrown around with very little overview of how it all actually works. And my whole first book is predicated on the idea of the neuromuscular system. So I think it's important to be able to explain it and hopefully have you be able to understand it in a little more comprehensive way. The nervous system is basically you. It is how you process information, it's how you output movement, it's how you output words, it's how you output ideas, it's how you input information from the environment, it's how you determine whether or not you feel safe. So your nervous system is incredibly important. And it's basically comprised on the top scale, if you were looking at like a CEO, a company org chart, you would have two distinct hierarchies up here. The first would be your central nervous system, which would be your brain, and your spinal cord, which runs down the length of your spine. So that's top branch number one. Top branch number two is your peripheral nervous system. You can think of that as everything else. All of these nerves that are exiting out the spinal cord, those are that's your peripheral nervous system. The only exception to this is your cranial nerves, which are located in your brain. So your central nervous system, when we go back to that, you can think of that again kind of as the information processing system. And it takes in all the information and it decides what should be done. The peripheral nervous system gathers the information from the world and carries out the proper output. And there are more subsets of the peripheral nervous system. So some of these nerves that exit out of here are part of the somatic nervous system. And your somatic nervous system is your voluntary nervous system. So you can think of it as the part of your nervous system that gets information about where your joints are in space. They get information about the temperature. They get information about pressure. They also output movement in your muscles. I can move my hand around because my brain is telling my hand to move. I can move my lips and make noise because my brain is giving me access to those muscles and allowing me to do that. And that voluntary part of the output aspect is your motor nervous system, otherwise known as your efferent nervous system. The part of the nervous system that was gathering all of that information and figuring out things like temperature and joint position and, oh, that's a little bit uncomfortable, I should move away from that. That is your sensory or afferent nervous system. So the way I used to think of this when I was first learning it was the acronym SAME. Sensory, also known as afferent, motor, also known as efferent. So this same acronym goes under that branch of the somatic nervous system. The other aspect of the peripheral nervous system is your autonomic nervous system. And this is the part of yourself that you can't control, that it happens automatically. Again, there are always exceptions. Things like breath is under both somatic control and autonomic control. And then things like bladder control or the pelvic floor muscles, those are under both voluntary control and autonomic control. So there's a little bit of bleeding into both sections there, but most of the time things are relatively separate. And the autonomic nervous system has three branches. Your sympathetic nervous system, which revs your nervous system up, right? This is the increased heart rate, increased breathing, maybe a little bit of flushed face. The blood is told by the autonomic nervous system to move away from the center of the body out to the working muscles. The other two branches of the autonomic nervous system are your parasympathetic nervous system, which does essentially the opposite of those things. Slows the heart rate down, slows the breathing down, moves the blood to the organs, kind of the more mellow aspect of yourself when you're feeling a little more relaxed. And then the final branch of the autonomic nervous system is your enteric nervous system, which is more kind of digestive stuff. So, quick overview. You have your executive control center, which is your brain and your spinal cord. That is your central nervous system. That is one branch. You also have this other branch that is your peripheral nervous system. That's everything else and the cranial nerves. Underneath this branch of the peripheral nervous system, there are branches. The first branch is the somatic nervous system, which is things you can control, and the other branch is your autonomic nervous system. And then those two branches also have arms. The somatic nervous system is, you can think of the acronym SAME, sensory or afferent nerves, motor or efferent nerves. The peripheral nervous system has three branches: your parasympathetic nervous system, which is chill, your sympathetic nervous system, which is a little bit revved up or a lot revved up, and your enteric nervous system, which is keeping everything kind of good in the digestive region. I know that seems like a lot, and I know that's a little bit overwhelming, but if you have that basic understanding, when you think of something like adding a band to an exercise, it provides afferent feedback. So it's acting upon the sensory nervous system. It's changing the brain's perception of where the pelvis is located in space. I'm speaking specifically of the exercise I taught yesterday. If you're not on Instagram, I basically just had people try coming into a quadruped position and placing the band right along their pelvis and letting the band pull them back. This wasn't meant to be a strengthening exercise. It was purely a sensory exercise. So this input from the afferent nervous system travels all the way up to our brain, and our brain detects this change in sensory feedback and says, oh, I should probably maybe change the way I'm doing the movement a little bit. And it sends a slightly different way of doing the movement via the motor system. So that was all acting on the somatic nervous system. I know that seems like a lot. I hope it makes sense. And even if it doesn't today, don't worry. The more you're exposed to these terms, the more it'll start to sink in and the more clear it'll become. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Thank you so much.